All right, Zach. So since we last spoke, the biggest news that has come across the Oregon football news desk is that Evan Stewart is likely done for the entire season. He could maybe play at some point. There is, based on what I've been told, there is a 0% chance, basically, that he winds up playing in the Penn State game, which you look at Oregon's schedule, and outside of the rivalry factor with Washington, Penn State is the biggest game on Oregon's schedule. It's going to be a whiteout. College game day could be there. I'm glad it won't be a big noon kickoff, so it'll be watched at a normal hour, and fans
9
on the West Coast.
Pacific time?
Yeah. No, we're saving our 9 a.m. kickoff game for the Northwestern matchup, as God intended, by the way. But I thought about that injury a bit and came back to this Penn State game because last year, Evan Stewart's best game in his first season as a Duck, by far, was Ohio State on October 12th. And you saw what happened when he got hurt and wasn't able to play in the Rose Bowl. The offense was not the same at all. I don't think that was entirely Evan Stewart. I think that was the layoff. They got out coached. The offensive line got pushed around. There were a lot of factors in there. But certainly that played a role in Oregon scoring just 8 points in the first half and 21 points in the game, whereas they scored 32 points in the first matchup. Evan Stewart had 145 yards and a touchdown. And these were not all routine easy catches. He got popped down the middle running a deep cross route. His touchdown was incredibly contested. He beat Ohio State's best corner. So I want your reaction from a Penn State standpoint. You hear that Oregon's projected number one receiver is not going to play in this big time college football matchup, and your first thought is what?
That's a big deal for Oregon, especially flying across the country. First time in a whiteout game. Penn State's looking for revenge. I will say this, let's provide some context here that Evan Stewart, maybe he was dealing, again, so correct me if I'm wrong, maybe he was dealing with a lingering injury at that point in the Big Ten championship game.
Yeah, the answer is we don't know because Dan Lanning says diddly and squat on injuries. Nobody ever knows.
And relate anything over here. Yeah, can't relate to that.
You get it.
It's strategic, so I don't blame them since they're allowed to do that. But Evan Stewart did not have a catch in that game. I know he played in the Big Ten championship, but he was held without a statistic in that game. AJ Harris did a phenomenal job. Part of that had to do with AJ Harris did a phenomenal job. The other reason was Tez Johnson was unstoppable. So you continue to go with the hot hand since Penn State, for the life of it, could not stop the guy in the slot at that time. But with that being said, Oregon loses Tez Johnson to the NFL, starting tight end. So he is the leading receiver that returns this season. And now you kind of have to act and behave that he's one of those players out the door as well. So you're losing a top 3 player from last year's passing attack with a new starting quarterback going into a hostile environment in first. Is that Oregon's first Big Ten game?
No, Northwestern will be.
Okay, so there we go. Yeah, that's the first bit. Okay.
Yeah. Northwestern in week 3 at Northwestern for that 9 a.m. Pacific time kickoff that I mentioned. I tell you what, the child in me is desperately clinging to the idea that Beth Mowins will be on that call, because if Beth Mowins is not calling the Northwestern football game that kicks at 9 a.m. Pacific time, I don't want to watch it.
So it's all those factors that don't play into Oregon's favor. It's, first time starting quarterback, another Big Ten road game, and further across the country. And you lose a veteran, you lose one of the primary playmakers in this offense. I immediately think of the 5-star freshman that's coming in Decorian Moore. Is better days of football. I'm not saying he can't be good right away, but better days. This is the case for everybody. If you're doing something new, if you're doing something for the first time, unless you're Jeremiah Smith, your impact may not be immediate. Okay. So I'm not saying that Moore won't be a focal point in the offense at some point, but in game 5 for Oregon, this early in the Big Ten slate, I imagine that he will be more involved and be more of a factor down the road in a whiteout game in prime time against the likes of AJ Harris. I don't know that that's going to be his best game. Let's say that. Maybe you could prove me wrong. He does have that potential. I just think he'll be better later rather than sooner. So this is a big deal for Oregon because of the circumstances later in the season. Different story. But early on like this, not ideal. Very less than ideal.
Yeah, I think, AJ Harris returning is obviously one of the big keys for Penn State's defense, along with Dennis Sutton, the edge rusher. And I know that you know that, but Oregon fans perhaps have forgotten. But the interesting question that popped into my head when you brought up AJ Harris and how good of a job he did on Stewart in the Big Ten championship game, it certainly seemed like he shadowed him kind of wherever he went.
For the most part.
Does he do that in this game? And if so, who is it on? Because by game 5, you'll have had a month of college football games under your belt if you're the Ducks. And this receiving core has, if you're just talking about the wide receivers, not Kenyon Sadiq. And I think this game is one thing that flips from the Big Ten championship game. I think Oregon has the best pass catching threat at tight end, whereas obviously it was Tyler Warren last year. I do think it'll be Kenyon Sadiq. AJ Harris is not a guy that covers a tight end, right? He's going to match up on a receiver.
He could. I'm not saying that he couldn't in specialty situations. Maybe you're inside of the red zone and you want to. He's just that versatile. Okay, so because he did cover. Tom Allen finally caught up to it. And I was screaming, not literally, because I would have been kicked out. But when I was at the Big Ten championship game from the press box in Lucas Oil Stadium, why isn't Tom Allen putting AJ Harris on Tez Johnson just because? Just give it a try. And late in the third quarter, he finally figured it out. And oh, look, you had a 3-and-out. So if it is necessary to do, I imagine Jim Knowles will try it. There is circumstantial stuff. Zachy Wheatley's probably going to mostly focus on covering Sadiq as he should. So, and I do remember that he scored 2 touchdowns.
Yep, had 2 touchdowns in the Big Ten championship game.
Exactly. So you have to account for him. Again, that was Tez Johnson. That was the Tez Johnson game. But he's still a reliable target and probably somebody that Dante Moore is going to rely on heavily early in the season.
I would think so. Just because he's one of the more experienced pass catchers, regardless of position you now have on this offense. But I do wonder, Jeremiah Smith came out of the gates guns blazing, and that's an anomaly. That guy could be drafted in the top 10 today, and that's uncommon for. And Ryan Williams would not be drafted. Cam Coleman would not be drafted in the top 10 right now. They might be one day, but they wouldn't be right now. And Jeremiah Smith, of course, would. But I think to have 4 games for Decorian Moore to get acclimated does make me think maybe by that time, and Oregon fans, I think, would be over the moon if they watched that game. And, I was taught, we're talking on our show leading up to it about, hey, AJ Harris is going to have to just go one-on-one Decorian Moore. That'd be a heck of a fight because Harris is going to be an NFL corner. He's probably one of the top 50 to 70 players in all of college football going into the season. And if he's guarding Oregon's true freshman receiver, that would be really exciting. But would he wind up there? Or is Malik Benson, who's a bit more experienced but hasn't been as productive, is that a guy who winds up drawing the AJ Harris assignment? Or does Penn State look at Oregon's receiving core and the balance that it could potentially have? Because the depth of talent is there. The experience just isn't. So I think there's this intriguing wait and see who pops, who emerges, where's Dante Moore looking most consistently, presuming he's the starter, which I think he will be. All of that comes into play. And maybe Jim Knowles says, you know what, AJ, we're going to stick you on whichever side you want, left or right, you pick. We're just going to keep you out there because Dante Moore's spreading the football around. I think all of that is, I think that's all incredibly likely. I'll say possible because who knows what's likely,